What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Erdell, and in today's video we're going to be covering the Scandinavian Defense, a very strong defensive system against the move e4, in which we move our queen pawn up 2 squares, immediately contending for the center of the board, attacking that centralized pawn, and 9 times out of 10 you're going to see white take this pawn on d5. And we've actually made a video on the main line of the Scandinavian, but I thought in today's video we could cover the second most popular option with knight c3, going into the closed variation. And now as black, we have a ton of different options. Do we want to take the pawn on e4, play d4, attacking the knight? Do we want to play a move like e6 or c6, simply looking to reinforce the pawn? Honestly, any of these moves are completely okay. If you like one of these and it fits your style, go on right ahead without any hesitation. But I thought in today's video I would show you my personal favorite, and also that which performs the best at the master and grandmaster level, and that's the move d4, creating a space advantage, attacking this knight. And now after knight ce2, white has officially reached the lizard attack. Yes guys, I know, crazy name, the lizard attack. And against this, I prefer the move c5. Why do I like c5? Well, we're going to play knight c6, developing the knight and reinforcing this pawn. Why not bring our pawn to c5 first? Again, gaining more of a space advantage and also allowing this d4 pawn to have a ton of support. Now white has a very interesting decision to make, and it really depends on what white wants to do with this light squared bishop. Does white want to fianchetto the bishop, or does white want to get this bishop into the game on e2, on c4, or on b5, and then castle kingside? If white wants to fianchetto the bishop, you're probably going to see a move like d3, followed by g3 later on. And if you're thinking that the bishop will come out into the game, you're probably going to see the main line with knight g3. We're going to cover knight g3, but let's first cover d3. What do we do here? Well, against d3, we're going to waste no time and play e5. Again, we're trying to create the biggest space advantage in the center of the board as we possibly can, so that our pieces have room to operate and that we have attacking chances on the queen side of the board. Usually here, white will play f4, and honestly, I think this is a much needed move. By playing f4, white is putting pressure on e5, and now we're going to play knight c6. We're not going to take the pawn, because if we did, this bishop could take back with tempo, and that would not be good news for black. So now after knight f3, as y'all can see, we have a pawn and a knight both attacking that pawn. So we're now going to play, again, not take the pawn on f4, but defend it with bishop d6. White might be tempted to take the pawn on e5, but honestly, I don't think this is the best option, because now we can take back with the knight. And here, if white doesn't take the knight immediately, we're going to play bishop g4, putting pressure on this knight. And I love black's attacking chances on the king side, going after the king on e1. I love black's game there. So I think white's smart to trade off this very active centralized piece by just taking it with the knight. And after bishop takes e5, playing bishop f4, again, trying to trade down. We could take this bishop, but if we did, the knight could take back, and all of a sudden white's position isn't so cramped. So we're going to play queen d6. We're trying to keep white as cramped as possible. If the knight can't get out, the bishop can't get out. And if the bishop can't get out, the rook can't get out. Every single piece makes an effect on all the others. And honestly, in this position, I think that white's best option is to take the bishop on e5, in which case we're completely fine. We're going to take back with the queen, get this bishop into the game with something like bishop g4, knight f6 ideas are in the air, castle kingside. We have c4 ideas. Development and attacking chess here is extremely easy. But if white doesn't take the bishop and plays a move like queen d2, I like this f6 move, and now no matter when white takes the bishop on e5, we're not going to take with the queen, but with the pawn on f6. And now we have an extremely strong center. We're going to continue with very easy moves like knight e7, followed by castling kingside. The reason we put our knight on e7 was so that this rook on f8 could prevent the white king from castling kingside. And now white is forced to play a move like bishop f3, wasting a move, allowing white to castle kingside, in which case we can now play h6, really preventing the queen from ever coming to g5. And if a move like castling kingside, continue with bishop e6, and I absolutely love black's game here. We have attacking chances on the queen side of the board, especially the c4 option. We can play moves like a5, b5, put our rooks on c8 and b8. We have knight g6 and knight f4 options, maybe even knight h4, putting pressure on this bishop. And honestly, one of our biggest advantages in this position, I think, is our activity of the bishop on e6 compared to the bishop on f3. This bishop on f3 is the same color as its own pawns. And because of this, honestly, this bishop could be called a tall pawn. This bishop really just can't do much. It doesn't have a ton of mobility and a ton of attacking chances. What about our bishop? Well, our bishop is on the opposite color of our pawns, and because of that, it has more room to operate, move around, attack, and really be flexible in our plans going forward. Needless to say, I think that black's position is simply better here, not to mention that this knight on g3 is a little bit awkwardly placed and our space advantage right in the center of the board. All that to say, I don't think it's a good idea for white to take this pawn on e5. I actually think it's better for white to just play g3, really holding the tension. We don't want to take this pawn on f4 because white could simply take back with really any of the pieces, and I actually like white's game there. What are we going to do here as black? I think we may be tempted to play a move like knight f6, but I think against knight f6, white actually gets some pretty good chances with attacking chess on the king side of the board. This e5 pawn is not as well protected, and more importantly, white could play moves like f5, followed by eventually g4 and g5, gaining a tempo on the knight and attacking our king side. What should we do instead? Well, I like the move knight ge7, and at the master and grandmaster level, black has won 100% of the games in this position. The whole idea is that our next move, we're going to play f6, and we have a very strong pawn chain from g7 all the way to d4, as well as c5, protecting it. The next move, we can simply play something like bishop e6, and now I think that with our space advantage, we're simply better. It may seem, after a move like f5, followed by something like g4, that white is going to attack us on the king side of the board, but I believe that black is winning this race. We're attacking on the queen side, white's attacking on the king side. Here we're simply going to play c4. Both of our bishops very active, and here if white takes the pawn, we're simply going to take back with the bishop, and we're simply better there. So I think it's probably best for white to not take this pawn for the rest of the game. White may want to play a move like g5, advancing on the king side of the board, but we're not going to take this pawn. In fact, we don't really care. We're just going to play a move like queen b6, putting pressure on b2. And on top of that, if d takes c4 is played, we have d3 check, attacking that king on g1. Our bishops are extremely active here. We have a space advantage in the center of the board. We have rook c8 ideas coming to this soon open file. And if a move like g takes f6, we now take back with the pawn. Notice how we did not castle kingside. Against the lizard attack, I am giving you guys a warning. Do not castle kingside when white plays f5 and g4. The king on e8 is much safer, and now because we haven't castled, we can then play rook g8, coming to this very open file, pinning the bishop to the king on g1. I love black's game here. So that covers the move d3, in which white is looking to fianchetto this light-colored bishop. What happens if white doesn't want to fianchetto the bishop and instead put it on e2, c4, or b5? What do we do in that situation if white plays something like knight g3, going into the main line of the lizard attack? Well, now we're going to play, just like the last variation, knight c6, and now we have a key idea against this knight g3 move that I think you guys should stay aware of. White could play this move right now. White could play this move in 2 moves or 4 moves, but whenever white plays knight f3, I love this h5 option. We wait for knight f3 because if we play h5 right away, white's queen has vision on it, and the knight can simply take it. But now with the knight on f3, white can't take this pawn, and we're actually threatening to play h4, kicking this knight back, and maybe even h3. I mean, we are taking space advantages all over the board. We already have one in the center, and if white doesn't play h4, we're about to roll over white on the king side of the board as well. So I think h4 is the best idea. But now h4 gives something up, and that is the square on g4. We're going to waste no time playing bishop g4. There's really no easy way for white to get rid of this bishop now, as it's pinning the knight to the queen on g1. And after a move like bishop e2, we can continue with e6. And really, this is a hard position to play with as the white pieces. I mean, if white just plays castling kingside, which would usually be a pretty good option, now we have bishop takes f3, and the pawn on h4 falls. We're going to continue with knight e5, attacking the bishop, bishop d6, attacking the knight on g3. Black simply has a clearly won game here. So I don't think castling kingside is the best idea, because this rook loses vision on the pawn on h4. What should white do instead? I actually like the move knight g5. From a chess strategy standpoint, in chess, when you're cramped, you want to trade down. And right now, going a move back, white is in a cramped position. We have a knight on g3, knight on f3, bishop on e2, queen that can't even move. This bishop can't move. The rook can go to one square. This rook can't even move on h1 because it's defending h4. I mean, white is in a deadlocked position. So knight g5 attempts to trade down some pieces and make more space for the pieces to move around and operate. And now we are going to take the bishop on e2. But now we have, after queen takes e2, a very nice move with d3. What on earth is black doing? Well, white has two choices, taking with the pawn or taking with the queen. Let's first go over the move queen takes d3. Why would we ever just give up a pawn? Well, we gave up a pawn, but now we're going to take that queen, and after she takes d3, play knight b4. Now we're threatening to take the extremely weak and vulnerable pawn on d3, and we're threatening knight c2 a check, which would fork the king on e1 and the rook on a1. I think white's best option is probably just to castle kingside, in which case we're going to take that pawn on d3 and have a monster knight, which is very hard for white to get rid of. This bishop can't get out to b2 because the knight attacks it. We're simply going to continue with moves like knight e7, knight c6, knight d4, maybe even fianchetto our bishop on g7 and put more pressure on that b2 pawn. Black has a simply better game there. What happens if white tries to hold on to the pawn with a move like king e2? Well, now we can simply play knight e7. The whole idea here is that we are in no rush. White has terrible pawn structure, is behind in development, and has a very awkward position. I think white has to try to get rid of this knight on b4 by playing a3, in which case we can play knight c2, attacking the rook on a1, and after rook b1, play knight d4 check, attacking this king. And yes, again, we're down a pawn, but I'm completely okay with this position. I mean, white plays king d1. We continue with knight ec6, and this square on b3 would be very nice for the knight, especially if it got some extra support, in which case this bishop and rook would be locked in for the rest of this game. So white may want to play the move b3. But against the move b3, we now have knight e5. I mean, black just has too many threats here. We're attacking this pawn. The king can't come to e2 or c2 because of our knight on d4. And now we're going to continue with moves like taking this pawn on d3, playing g6, fianchettoing our bishop, king e7, maybe play rook d8 and form a battery ram with both of our rooks. We simply have a one game here, and white's pieces can honestly barely move here. So that covers the move queen takes d3. But honestly, c takes d3, we have the same exact idea with knight b4, both our knight and our queen attacking this d3 pawn, and there is no way for white to save it after castling kingside. It depends on your preference. I personally would rather take with the queen because I think that this endgame is simply winning. We're about to bring more reinforcements with rook d8, and then we'll have knight c2 ideas. And if white takes the queen on d3, we can simply take back with the knight, a monster knight here that white can't really get rid of. I mean, if white plays a move like b3, we could either fianchetto our bishop or even put the bishop on d6, eyeing e5 and f4. And remember, this bishop can't come to b2 because our knight attacks it. This is a simply one game for black. If you'd like to learn more about the theory behind the Scandinavian defense with the main line and how to best play it with the black pieces, click the video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about chess openings in general, click the playlist to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.